Imagine you are a plague doctor in Paris, 1348. Your leather mask, shaped like a bird's beak, fills with aromatic herbs, rosemary, thyme, and dried roses. The long black cloak of waxed cloth rustles with every movement. In your hand rests an iron rod, used to touch the sick without approaching them. The streets of Paris are saturated with smoke from fires where they burn the clothes of the dead. Bells ring not by time, but for the deceased. You wake in your workshop, surrounded by vials of medicines and amulets. Outside the window, fog drifts, and a new day full of work awaits you in this city, where death stalks every street corner and lurks behind every closed door. The stone walls of your workshop hold the morning chill deep within their ancient blocks, each stone cut and placed by masons who died long before the great mortality arrived to claim so many souls. Embers from last night's fire glow dimly in the stone hearth, casting weak orange light that dances and flickers across wooden shelves lined with glass bottles and clay pots of every conceivable size and shape. Each container holds precious ingredients for your daily work against the pestilence that ravages the city. Powdered unicorn horn ground to the finest dust using ancient techniques passed down through generations. Crushed pearls that shimmer like captured moonlight and hold within them the essence of the pure ocean depths. Dried dragon's blood that glows red as the finest wine and carries the power of the legendary beasts, and countless herbs collected from monastery gardens across France by monks who risk their lives to gather these healing plants. Your sleeping area adjoins the workshop, separated only by a heavy wool curtain that hangs from iron rings forged by the same metalworker who now lies dying 3 streets away. The straw mattress beneath your body rustles softly as you shift your weight, feeling the burden of another day pressing down upon your shoulders like the massive stone ceiling that looms above your head. Through the single narrow window, gray morning light filters through oiled parchment that has been carefully treated to keep out the corrupted air while allowing some illumination to enter, revealing countless dust motes dancing in the still air like tiny spirits of the dead who refuse to depart this cursed city. The leather mask that will protect you rests on its specially carved wooden stand beside your bed, the long beak pointing toward the ceiling like some strange bird frozen in eternal silence, waiting to shield you once again from the poisonous vapors that fill every breath of air in Paris. The black glass eyepieces, ground by craftsmen in distant Venice and transported here at enormous cost and risk, reflect the dying firelight, giving the mask an otherworldly appearance that speaks of the supernatural forces you must battle each day. You run your weathered fingers along the smooth leather surface, checking with the careful attention of one whose life depends on this protection for any cracks or tears that might allow the poisonous air carrying the great mortality to seep through and claim another victim. Rising slowly from your bed of straw and rough wool blankets, you feel the cold stone floor against your bare feet, the chill sending shivers up your spine that remind you of the cold touch of death that surrounds you always. The workshop smells of a complex mixture of herbs both sweet and bitter, rich leather treated with oils and wax, and the lingering smoke from yesterday's purification fires that still clings to every surface despite your best efforts to cleanse the air. The scent tells the story of your calling, healing and death, protection and danger, hope and despair all mingled together in the close air of this stone chamber that serves as both sanctuary and laboratory. You move carefully to the fireplace, your bare feet finding familiar paths between the tools and containers that fill every available space, and add pieces of dried wood to the glowing embers, each piece selected for its aromatic properties as well as its ability to burn clean and bright. Blowing gently until small flames begin to lick at the bark with orange tongues, you coax warmth back into the room, pushing back the morning chill that seems to carry with it whispers of the death that stalks the streets outside. The fire crackles and pops as the wood catches, filling the room with dancing light and the comforting sound of flames consuming fuel, a sound that speaks of life and energy in a city grown far too quiet. Water sits waiting in a ceramic basin crafted by potters who fled the city weeks ago, cold from the night air that seeps through every crack and crevice in the ancient stones. You splash the icy water on your face and hands, the shock helping to clear your mind of the dark dreams that plague your sleep and prepare you for the grim work that lies ahead. The water runs down your face like tears, carrying away the last traces of sleep and leaving you alert and ready to face whatever horrors the day may bring. A small mirror of polished metal, one of your most precious possessions, shows your reflection. Tired eyes that have seen far too much death and suffering, graying hair that was once brown as the earth, and deep lines etched into your face by months of tending to the dying and watching hope fade from countless eyes. Your daily routine begins with the careful and methodical examination of the leather mask that will be your primary shield against the forces of corruption and death. The long beak, crafted by leather workers who learned their trade from masters dating back generations, must be filled with fresh aromatic substances, carefully chosen to guard against the corrupted air that spreads pestilence throughout every quarter of the city. You remove yesterday's herbs, now brown and wilted from absorbing the evil vapors that seek constantly to penetrate your defenses, examining each leaf and stem for signs of the corruption they have drawn out of the poisonous atmosphere. Replacing them methodically with precise attention to ancient formulas, you select fresh rosemary for clarity of mind and protection against evil influences, knowing that this herb has been blessed by priests and grown in sacred ground. Sweet thyme follows, its purpose to purify the very air you breathe and prevent the corrupted vapors from reaching your lungs where they might take hold and begin their deadly work. Fresh mint comes next, carefully chosen to settle your stomach against the nausea that often accompanies exposure to the terrible sights and smells of the pestilence, while precious cloves, imported at great expense from distant lands, serve to warm your blood against the chill of death that seems to follow you wherever you go. Each herb serves a specific and vital purpose in the complex system of protection that keeps you alive and able to continue your work in the face of forces that have claimed so many others. The placement of each leaf and stem follows patterns learned from masters who studied under physicians trained in the great medical schools of Salerno and Montpellier, where the accumulated wisdom of centuries has been preserved and passed down through careful instruction and practice. The aromatic substances must be distributed evenly throughout the beak to ensure that every breath you take is properly cleansed and purified. The mask itself represents the culmination of knowledge gathered over generations of plague fighters. Its design based on the careful study of how corrupted air moves and spreads, and how it can be filtered and purified before it reaches the vulnerable human body. The long beak serves not only to hold the protective herbs, but also to keep the dangerous miasma at a safe distance from your nose and mouth, creating a barrier of clean air between you and the sources of corruption that you must approach in your work. The leather has been treated with special oils and blessed substances that resist the penetration of evil vapors, while the straps that secure it to your head have been reinforced with additional layers of protection. Every detail of the mask's construction reflects the accumulated experience of those who have fought this battle before you, and many who gave their lives in the process of learning what works and what fails when confronting the supernatural forces. Behind the great mortality, the mask fits snugly over your entire head, secured with leather straps that tie firmly behind your neck, with knots that will not loosen no matter how long and strenuous your day becomes. The glass eyepieces, each one individually crafted and fitted to provide the clearest possible vision, while maintaining an impenetrable barrier against infectious vapors, allow you to see clearly while protecting your eyes from the corrupted vapors that rise constantly from the bodies of the sick and dying. The long beak extends well beyond your face, creating a safe zone of purified air around your nose and mouth, keeping the dangerous miasma at a distance that prevents it from overwhelming your defenses. When you breathe through the mask, the air passes through the carefully arranged herbs, each breath cleansed of corruption and purified by the aromatic substances before it reaches your lungs, where it could take hold and begin the process of infection that has claimed so many others. The system works through principles understood by the greatest physicians of the age, who have studied the nature of corrupted air and developed methods to combat its evil influence through the proper application of natural substances blessed by divine providence. Next comes the careful and methodical donning of the clothing that will shield your body through the long and dangerous day ahead. each garment serving a specific purpose in the complex system of protection that allows you to work among the infected without succumbing to the disease yourself. First comes a linen shirt that has been soaked in strong vinegar and then dried completely, the fabric retaining the sharp, acrid smell that makes your eyes water but provides essential protection against the evil humors that seek to enter through the pores of your skin. The vinegar, blessed by priests and prepared according to ancient formulas, repels the corrupted vapors that surround the sick and prevents them from penetrating the natural defenses of your body. The shirt has been cut and sewn according to patterns designed to provide maximum coverage while allowing freedom of movement, with reinforced seams that will not tear under the stress of your daily work. Every thread has been blessed and every stitch made with prayers for protection against the forces of evil that seek constantly to claim new victims. Over the vinegar-soaked shirt goes a leather doublet, thick and stiff from treatment with beeswax and special oils that create an impenetrable barrier against moisture and evil vapors. The leather comes from animals that were healthy when slaughtered, their hides treated according to ancient methods that preserve not only the physical properties of the material, but also its spiritual resistance to corruption. The doublet fits snugly, but allows for the movement required in your work, with reinforced areas at shoulders and elbows where wear is heaviest. The long black cloak that marks your profession and announces your presence to all who see you represents the solemn and sacred nature of your calling in these dark times. Made from heavy wool that has been treated with oils and wax according to formulas preserved in monastery libraries, the cloak reaches nearly to the ground and covers your entire body like a protective shroud that shields you from the corrupted atmosphere that fills every street and alley in the city. The fabric has been woven by craftsmen who learned their trade from masters dating back generations, each thread spun with prayers and blessed with holy water. The wool itself comes from sheep that grazed in monastery pastures, where the grass has been blessed and the animals protected by constant prayers. The treatment with oils and wax creates a surface that sheds moisture and resists the penetration of evil vapors, while the dark color serves both practical and symbolic purposes. Black absorbs heat from the sun, helping to maintain the body temperature needed to fight off infection, while also representing the solemnity of your work among the dying and the need for reverence in the face of death. The cloak fastens with clasps made from iron blessed by priests, the metal itself resistant to corruption and serving as additional protection against the supernatural forces that many believe are responsible for the pestilence. The hood can be drawn up over your mask when additional protection is needed, creating a complete barrier between your body and the corrupted air that surrounds you constantly during your work among the infected. Leather gloves of the finest quality extend past your elbows, leaving no skin exposed to the dangerous air that carries death from house to house and street to street. The leather is thick enough to prevent bites from the infected fleas that spread the disease, while remaining flexible enough to allow you to handle the delicate instruments required for your medical work. Each finger is individually fitted and reinforced at the joints where movement is greatest, with additional layers of protection at the palm and fingertips where contact with contaminated surfaces is most likely. The gloves have been treated with the same oils and blessed substances used on your other garments, creating a barrier that resists penetration by corrupted vapors while maintaining the flexibility needed for precise work. You examine each finger carefully every morning, looking for tears or weak spots that might compromise your protection, knowing that even the smallest hole could allow corruption to enter and begin its deadly work within your body. Tall boots of the finest treated leather reach almost to your knees, providing protection for your lower legs and feet against the corrupted earth where evil vapors are believed to seep up from the ground itself, contaminated by the countless bodies that have been buried in hastily dug graves throughout the city. The soles are made of thick wood bound with iron strips, creating a barrier between your feet and the contaminated ground, while providing sure footing on wet stones and uneven surfaces. Iron nails stud the soles in patterns that provide grip, while also serving as additional protection against the ground-dwelling demons that many believe spread corruption through direct contact with the earth. The iron has been blessed by priests and forged according to ancient techniques that preserve its spiritual as well as physical properties. The boots lace tightly to prevent any gap that might allow corrupted air to enter, with reinforced areas at the ankle and instep where stress is greatest. Your leather instrument bag, crafted by the finest leather workers in the city before the pestilence drove so many to flee or die, holds the essential tools of your trade. each one blessed and consecrated for the sacred work of fighting disease and death. The bag itself has been treated with the same protective substances used on your clothing, creating a barrier that prevents corruption from contaminating your instruments when not in use. Multiple compartments keep different types of tools separated and organized, allowing you to find what you need quickly, even in the dim light of sick rooms. The iron rod that serves as your primary tool for examining patients without direct contact measures exactly the length of your forearm from elbow to fingertips, forged from the finest steel and blessed by priests who understand its vital importance in your work. Its surface is smooth and polished to prevent corrupted substances from adhering to the metal, while the weight and balance allow for precise control when lifting clothing or pointing to specific areas of concern. The rod can be heated in fire to kill any corruption that might cling to its surface after contact with infected patients or contaminated materials. Glass vials of various sizes contain the medicines you have prepared according to ancient formulas preserved in medical texts that survived the burning of the Great Library at Alexandria. Theriac, the great universal antidote made from 64 different ingredients, including the flesh of vipers, remains your most potent weapon against the plague, its preparation requiring months of careful work and the blessing of multiple priests. Each bottle is carefully labeled with symbols you have developed over years of practice, marking not only the contents, but also the date of preparation and the specific prayers recited during its creation. The vials themselves are made from glass blown by craftsmen who learned their trade in the workshops of Venice, where the secrets of creating vessels pure enough to hold the most sacred medicines have been preserved for generations. Each vial is tested for flaws that might allow corruption to enter and contaminate the precious contents, while special stoppers made from blessed cork and sealed with wax prevent any loss of potency or contamination from outside sources. A leather-bound journal, its pages made from parchment prepared by monks who devoted their lives to preserving knowledge, records your daily observations in detailed entries that may someday help future physicians understand the nature of this terrible disease. Each patient receives a complete entry noting their symptoms when first examined, their responses to various treatments, and their ultimate fate, whether recovery or death. Over the months since the pestilence arrived in Paris, these records have begun to reveal patterns that guide your treatment decisions and help you understand which approaches work best for different types of cases. The journal itself has been blessed by bishops and protected with special covers that resist both physical damage and spiritual contamination. The ink you use is made from ingredients chosen for their resistance to corruption, while each page is marked with protective symbols that preserve the integrity of the information recorded. The knowledge contained within these pages represents not only your personal observations, but also the accumulated wisdom of all those who have fought this battle before you. Instruments for bloodletting, the most essential medical procedure for removing corrupted humors from infected bodies, rest in silk-lined compartments within your bag, each tool crafted by master metalworkers who understood the precise requirements. For surgical work, sharp knives of the finest steel can open veins with surgical precision while minimizing trauma to surrounding tissues. The blades are forged from metal that has been purified through special processes and blessed by priests who understand their life-saving purpose. Copper cups collect the corrupted blood that carries disease through the body, the metal chosen for its natural resistance to corruption and its ability to reveal the color and consistency of the blood being removed. Small metal funnels help direct the flow into collection vessels, preventing spillage that might contaminate the surrounding area. Each tool has been blessed and consecrated through ceremonies that invoke divine protection for both the physician and the patient, recognizing that this work requires supernatural as well as natural assistance. Your breakfast consists of carefully chosen foods that provide protection against the pestilence while maintaining your strength for the difficult work ahead. Bread that has aged for several days reduces the risk of corruption, as evil influences cannot take hold in properly prepared grain that has been blessed and stored according to ancient methods. The bread is hard and requires soaking in wine to make it edible, but this process also adds the protective properties of the wine to the nourishment provided by the grain. Wine mixed with protective herbs strengthens your blood and helps your body resist the disease that threatens everyone in the city with its invisible presence. The wine comes from monastery vineyards where the grapes have been blessed and the fermentation process conducted with prayers and protective rituals. The herbs added to the wine include sage for wisdom and protection, mint for digestion and settling of the stomach, and a small but precious amount of powdered unicorn horn that provides protection against all forms of poison and corruption. Each bite of food must be considered carefully, as what you consume directly affects your body's ability to fight off the corruption that surrounds you constantly during your work among the infected. The simple meal provides not only physical nourishment, but also spiritual protection through the blessed nature of its ingredients and the prayers recited during its preparation. Even the act of eating becomes a ritual of protection and preparation for the battles that lie ahead. Before leaving the safety and protection of your workshop sanctuary, you conduct the morning blessing that prepares your soul for the spiritual as well as physical challenges of the work ahead. Kneeling before a small altar that holds a wooden crucifix carved by monastery craftsmen from wood taken from trees that grew in sacred ground, you recite prayers for protection and divine guidance that have been used by plague fighters for generations. The altar itself has been consecrated by bishops and blessed with relics of saints who devoted their lives to caring for the sick and dying. The work that lies ahead requires far more than mortal medical knowledge and earthly skill. It demands constant assistance from the Almighty to succeed against a disease that many learned theologians believe represents God's righteous wrath against the accumulated sins of humanity. The prayers seek not only protection for yourself, but also guidance in your treatments and compassion for those who suffer, recognizing that true healing comes from divine mercy working through human instruments. Incense burns in a small brass censer crafted by metalworkers who learned their trade in monastery workshops where the creation of sacred objects is considered a form of prayer. The sweet smoke rises toward heaven, filling the room with aromatic vapors that purify the air while carrying your prayers upward to the throne of divine mercy. The incense itself is made from resins gathered in the Holy Land and blessed by priests who have walked where Christ himself once walked. You pass each of your instruments through this purifying smoke, blessing them individually and asking for divine guidance in their use, recognizing that these tools serve as extensions of God's healing power, working through human hands. The leather mask receives special attention during this blessing, for it will be your primary shield against the forces of corruption throughout the long day ahead. As you prepare to face the world outside your protected sanctuary, you feel the weight of responsibility settling on your shoulders, like the heavy cloak that will protect your body from the corrupted air that fills every breath in the city of Paris. The streets of Paris greet you with an emptiness that feels deeply unnatural for a city of such size and importance in the Kingdom of France, where once hundreds of merchants, craftsmen, and citizens would fill the morning hours with the cheerful sounds of commerce and conversation. Now only scattered figures move quickly between buildings like ghosts fleeing from daylight, most covering their faces with cloth soaked in vinegar or other protective substances recommended by physicians. The very stones seem to echo with the absence of life that once filled these thoroughfares with activity and hope. The cobblestones, laid by workers who died long before the pestilence arrived to claim so many victims, glisten with moisture from the morning fog that rises from the Seine like the breath of some great sleeping beast. The fog itself seems tainted with corruption, carrying strange odors and an oppressive weight that makes breathing difficult even through your protective mask. The air carries the constant smell of smoke from fires that burn throughout the city in a desperate attempt to purify the atmosphere and drive away the evil vapors that spread death from street to street. Your footsteps echo off the stone buildings as you make your way through narrow streets toward the first house marked with the dreaded red cross that announces the presence of the pestilence within. The sound of your iron-studded boots on stone creates a rhythm that announces your approach to all who hear it, a sound that has become associated with both hope and fear in equal measure. The iron nails embedded in your boot soles click against the cobblestones with each step, creating a steady percussion that serves as both navigation aid in the fog and announcement of your professional presence. People recognize this distinctive sound and respond according to their circumstances and needs. Some flee quickly indoors to avoid any contact with someone who moves among the infected, while others approach desperately, begging for help for their loved ones who lie dying behind locked doors. The sound of your approach has become one of the few remaining signs of organized resistance against the forces of death that have claimed so many victims throughout the city. The iron rod in your gloved hand serves multiple purposes beyond the examination of patients, its weight providing both physical comfort and psychological authority as you walk through streets where normal social order has largely collapsed. The metallic sound it makes when tapped against stone or wood announces your presence to those within houses, while also serving as a tool for testing surfaces and objects that might be contaminated. Most importantly, it maintains the crucial distance between yourself and those who might carry the contagion in their breath, their touch, or their very presence. Thick smoke rises continuously from braziers that have been placed at street corners throughout the city by order of the municipal authorities, burning aromatic woods and precious herbs in a coordinated attempt to purify the air itself and drive away the corrupted vapors that carry pestilence from house to house like an invisible plague wind. The city authorities have ordered these fires to be maintained constantly, believing that sweet-smelling smoke will create barriers of clean air that prevent the spread of corruption from one district to another. The aromatic woods used in these fires include cedar brought from the mountains at great expense, its smoke believed to have special power against evil influences. Rosemary and thyme from monastery gardens add their protective properties to the rising smoke, while more exotic substances like frankincense and myrrh imported from distant lands at enormous cost provide additional spiritual protection. The smoke mingles with the morning fog, creating a hazy atmosphere that reduces visibility and gives the entire city an otherworldly, dreamlike appearance that speaks of divine judgment falling upon the earth. Red crosses painted on wooden doors mark the houses where plague has gained entry, like brands marking diseased cattle destined for slaughter. City law requires these markings so that healthy citizens know to avoid these dwellings and the corruption that lies within their walls, like a malevolent presence waiting to claim new victims. The crosses serve as warnings, but also as appeals for help, marking places where human suffering reaches its most desperate extremes. Some crosses appear fresh, painted in bright red pigment that still drips slightly down the wood grain, indicating that the pestilence has only recently entered these homes and begun its deadly work. Others have faded to brown over the weeks since they were first applied, marking houses where death visited long ago and may have completed its grim harvest. A few crosses have been crossed out with white paint, indicating that the immediate danger has passed and the house has been purified through fire and prayer, though the memory of what occurred within those walls will linger long after the paint has faded. The morning mist clings to the narrow streets like ghostly fingers, reaching out from the world of the dead to touch the living, creating an atmosphere of mystery and foreboding that makes even familiar neighborhoods seem strange and threatening. The fog seems to muffle sound and distort vision, making it difficult to distinguish between shadows and real threats, between the living and the dead, who some claim still walk these streets in search of the rest that has been denied them. Cartwheels rumble occasionally in the distance as the dead collectors make their grim rounds, gathering the bodies that await burial in the mass graves that have been dug outside the city walls, where the earth can accommodate the enormous number of corpses that the pestilence produces daily. The sound of wooden wheels on stone creates a rhythmic percussion that serves as a constant reminder of mortality and the temporary nature of all human life and achievement. Dogs bark sporadically from hidden courtyards and distant streets, their voices echoing off the stone walls with a lonely, mournful quality that seems to express the grief of the entire city. Many of these animals have been abandoned by owners who fled or died, and they roam the streets in packs that grow bolder as hunger drives them to seek food wherever it can be found. Their howling at night has become one of the characteristic sounds of the plague-stricken city, a wild chorus that speaks of the breakdown of civilized order. Church bells ring at irregular intervals throughout the morning, not marking the hours as they once did in happier times, but tolling constantly for the souls of the departed who have passed from this world to whatever judgment awaits them in the next. The bronze voices of the bells carry across the city like prayers made audible, their mournful tones creating a continuous background of mourning that reminds all who hear them of the fragility of life and the certainty of death. You pause at several houses along your route, noting which ones bear fresh red crosses and which show signs of recent death or abandonment. This knowledge helps you plan your day and prepare the appropriate medicines for the conditions you are likely to encounter, while also allowing you to assess the spread of the pestilence through different neighborhoods and social classes. Some houses show thin trails of smoke rising from their chimneys, suggesting that life continues within despite the surrounding atmosphere of death and despair. Other dwellings stand cold and silent, their windows shuttered against both the corrupted air and the sights of suffering that fill the streets with evidence of human mortality. These abandoned houses serve as reminders of families that have been completely destroyed by the pestilence, leaving behind only empty rooms and possessions that no one dares to claim for fear of contamination. The sight of these vacant buildings creates a profound sense of loss that goes beyond individual grief to encompass the destruction of entire communities and ways of life. As you walk through the fog-shrouded streets, you observe the few other people who venture outside during these dangerous times, each representing a different aspect of society's response to the crisis that has engulfed the city. City guards patrol in small groups, wearing crude masks made from cloth and leather that provide minimal protection against the corrupted air. Their presence serves more to maintain order among the living than to combat the pestilence itself, though their willingness to remain at their posts speaks to a courage that deserves recognition and respect. Priests hurry between houses carrying small leather bags that contain the holy oils needed for administering last rites to the dying, their black robes making them nearly invisible in the morning mist. These brave men risk their lives daily to provide spiritual comfort to those facing death, often entering contaminated houses without adequate protection in order to ensure that souls depart this world properly shriven of sin. Many priests have already fallen victim to the disease they fight, but others continue to arrive from monastery communities to take their place in this spiritual battle against death and despair. Other plague doctors move through distant streets, their black-cloaked figures visible through the mist like harbingers of either salvation or doom, depending on the perspective of those who observe them. Each follows his own route through the city, visiting patients and attempting to apply medical knowledge against forces that seem to transcend natural understanding. The sight of these fellow practitioners provides some comfort in the knowledge that you are not alone in this fight, though the growing number of empty houses suggests that the battle is far from won. The very air seems thick with invisible menace that presses against your mask and cloak, like a living presence seeking entry into your protected body. You find yourself breathing carefully through the aromatic herbs in your mask's beak, grateful for their protective powers against the corruption that surrounds you on all sides, like an ocean of death. Each breath becomes a conscious act of survival, filtered through centuries of medical knowledge and blessed by divine providence that provides both the means and the will to continue this dangerous work. The wind carries sounds from different parts of the city, distant cries from houses where death visits in the early morning hours, the rumble of carts carrying bodies to burial grounds outside the walls, and the constant background of prayers from churches where desperate people seek divine intervention in their hour of greatest need. These sounds create a symphony of despair that reminds you constantly of the magnitude of the crisis facing not only Paris, but all of Christian Europe, as reports arrive daily of similar devastation in other cities and kingdoms. The very stones beneath your feet seem to absorb the sorrow and fear that permeates every corner of the city, making each step feel heavy with the weight of collective suffering that has transformed a once proud center of learning and commerce into something resembling descriptions of purgatory found in theological texts. The familiar landmarks, churches, markets, guild halls, remain physically unchanged, but have taken on new meanings in the context of widespread death and social collapse. The first house that requires your attention stands on a narrow street near the great Cathedral of Notre Dame, its 3 stories of timber and stone construction leaning slightly inward toward the buildings across the way, in the manner typical of medieval urban architecture. The structures nearly meet in the middle, creating a tunnel-like effect that traps the corrupted air below and prevents the purifying winds from cleansing the atmosphere at street level. This architectural feature, once charming and practical for providing shelter from rain and sun, now serves to concentrate the dangerous vapors that spread the pestilence from person to person. The red cross painted on the wooden door appears fresh and bright, the pigment still slightly wet and dripping down the wood grain in crimson streaks that resemble tears of blood. The cross was probably painted within the last day or two, indicating that the pestilence has only recently made its presence known within these walls and begun its deadly work among the family members who shelter behind the heavy oak barrier. The brightness of the paint suggests that hope may still exist for at least some of the inhabitants, if medical intervention can be provided quickly enough to halt the disease's progress. You announce your arrival by striking the door 3 times with your iron rod, the metallic impacts echoing through the quiet street and penetrating deep into the house beyond, where family members wait in fear and desperation for help to arrive. The sound serves not only to alert the inhabitants to your presence, but also to establish your authority as a medical practitioner with the right to enter homes during this time of quarantine and emergency. The rhythm of 3 strikes follows ancient custom and serves as a recognition signal that identifies you as a legitimate physician rather than a thief or other malefactor seeking to take advantage of the crisis. After several long moments that seem to stretch into eternity, the sound of shuffling footsteps becomes audible on the other side of the thick wooden barrier, accompanied by whispered conversations in voices too low to distinguish individual words. The delay suggests that the inhabitants are debating whether to open the door, weighing their fear of allowing contaminated air to enter against their desperate need for medical assistance. Finally, a woman's voice calls out, weak and frightened, asking in barely more than a whisper who seeks entry to this house of sickness and potential death. You identify yourself clearly and authoritatively as the plague doctor assigned to this district by the municipal authorities, speaking through the leather mask in the official tone that commands both respect and compliance from citizens who understand the gravity of the situation. Your voice, muffled by the mask but still carrying the weight of professional authority, provides reassurance that help has arrived while also establishing the serious nature of the medical emergency that requires immediate attention and cooperation. The door opens slowly, hinges creaking with the sound of metal that has not been oiled recently, revealing a woman of perhaps 30 years whose appearance has been dramatically altered by the plague and its associated suffering. Where once she might have been considered attractive, the disease and the stress of caring for sick family members have aged her considerably beyond her natural span. Her dark hair hangs loose and unwashed around her shoulders in tangles that speak of days spent focused entirely on nursing the sick without regard for personal appearance or comfort. Her clothes are stained and rumpled from days of continuous wear during the crisis, marked with substances that tell the story of her struggles against the disease that has invaded her home. Dark circles ring her eyes like bruises, and her face bears the hollow, gaunt look of someone who has watched loved ones slip toward death despite desperate efforts to save them. Her hands shake slightly as she holds the door, whether from exhaustion, fear, or the beginning stages of infection in her own body. She leads you through a narrow hallway lined with religious images and family portraits that provide glimpses into happier times before the pestilence arrived to transform their world into a nightmare of suffering and fear. The portraits show family members in their finest clothing, posed formally for the artist who captured their images when death seemed distant and life held promise for the future. Now these images serve as memorials to a way of life that has been destroyed by forces beyond human control or understanding. Past a cold hearth where no fire burns despite the morning chill, the hallway leads to a small room at the back of the house where the smell of sickness hangs thick in the stagnant air like a living presence that seems to resist all efforts at purification. The atmosphere inside feels heavy and oppressive, laden with the combined odors of unwashed bodies that have been confined in close quarters, human waste from patients too weak to maintain normal hygiene, fear sweat that permeates clothing and bedding, and the lingering traces of various folk remedies that have been tried without success in desperate attempts to halt the disease's progress. A single small window provides the only source of natural light in the room, its wooden shutters kept partially closed in a futile attempt to keep out the corrupted air that flows through the city streets like an invisible river of death. The reduced light creates a twilight atmosphere even in the morning hours, adding to the sense of being trapped in a space removed from the normal world of sunlight and fresh air. Bundles of herbs hang from the low ceiling beams, rosemary, thyme, and garlic, placed there in a desperate attempt to purify the air through their aromatic properties, though their effectiveness appears limited against the concentrated corruption that fills the small space. The patient lies motionless on a straw mattress that has been placed near the cold fireplace, probably in hopes that proximity to where fires once burned might provide some protection against the evil influences that are believed to spread through cold and damp conditions. The mattress, once clean and comfortable, now bears the stains and odors of extended illness, its straw stuffing compressed and matted from supporting a body racked with fever and convulsions. Rough woolen blankets, once colorful but now faded and stained, cover the patient's still form. He appears to be a man of middle years, perhaps 40 or 45, possibly a craftsman or small merchant based on the quality of his clothes, though those garments that once marked his social status and prosperity are now soaked through with the sweat of fever and stained with the various substances his body has expelled during the course of his illness. The fabric, once fine wool dyed in rich colors, has become a map of suffering marked with dark patches where bodily fluids have soaked through despite the family's efforts to keep him clean and comfortable. His face burns red with the internal heat of fever that consumes his body from within, the skin flushed and hot to the touch even from a distance, while his breathing comes in short, labored gasps that speak of lungs filled with corruption and struggling to extract life-giving air from the poisonous atmosphere that surrounds him. Each breath seems to require tremendous effort, his chest rising and falling in irregular rhythms that suggest his body's vital systems are failing in their battle against the disease that has invaded every organ and tissue. Dark swellings have appeared on his neck and under his arms, the dreaded buboes that mark the unmistakable presence of the great mortality in his body, and announce that the disease has progressed beyond the early stages of simple fever into the more dangerous phase where death becomes increasingly likely. These swellings, some as large as chicken eggs, press against his skin with a dark, purplish color that suggests the corruption has concentrated in these areas and threatens to burst forth and spread its poison throughout his entire system. You begin your examination from a safe distance of several arm lengths, using your iron rod to lift portions of his clothing and expose the affected areas without bringing yourself into direct contact with the corrupted vapors that surround him like an invisible cloud of death. The rod allows you to manipulate fabric and observe symptoms while maintaining the crucial barrier that protects you from infection, its smooth metal surface reflecting the dim light as you carefully probe and examine the patient's condition. The buboes appear large and dark when exposed to view, sure signs that the pestilence has taken firm hold within his flesh and is spreading its poison through his blood with the relentless efficiency that has made this disease such an effective killer. The swellings show the characteristic coloration and texture that experienced plague doctors learn to recognize as indicators of the disease's progress and the likelihood of survival or death. His eyes, when they occasionally flutter open in moments of semi-consciousness, appear clouded and unfocused, struggling to perceive the world around him through the haze of fever and the approaching shadow of death that seems to darken his vision. The whites of his eyes show a yellowish tinge that suggests the corruption has begun to affect his liver and other vital organs, while his pupils respond slowly to changes in light, indicating that the disease may be affecting his brain as well as his body. When you call his name, speaking clearly through your mask in tones meant to penetrate the fog of illness that surrounds his consciousness, his eyes open briefly, but fail to focus properly on your masked figure looming above him. His gaze wanders aimlessly around the room, as if searching for something familiar in a world that has become strange and threatening, while his lips move slightly, as if attempting to speak words that his weakened body cannot produce with sufficient force to be heard. The woman who opened the door, his wife, you assume from her obvious distress and the way she hovers protectively near his bedside, wrings her hands continuously in a gesture of nervous anxiety and looks to you with desperate hope that medical knowledge might succeed where prayers and folk remedies have failed to halt the disease's inexorable progress. Her eyes search your masked face for any sign of encouragement or hope, while her entire posture speaks of exhaustion from maintaining constant vigil over her dying husband. You can see in her face the terrible knowledge that she may be witnessing the final hours of her husband's life, watching helplessly as the man she married and built a life with slowly slips away, despite all her efforts to nurse him back to health. Yet she cannot bring herself to abandon hope entirely, clinging to the possibility that your medical skills might provide the miracle that will restore her husband to health and return their family to the happiness they once knew. The room's atmosphere grows more oppressive as you continue your examination, the weight of suffering and approaching death pressing down like a physical force that makes breathing difficult even through your protective mask. The very air seems thick with the presence of mortality, creating an environment where hope struggles to survive against the overwhelming evidence of human frailty and the power of disease to destroy even the strongest constitution. Through the partially open window, You can hear the distant sounds of the city continuing its grim existence. Cartwheels rumbling on cobblestones as death collectors make their rounds. The occasional shout from a distant street where someone calls for help that may not come. And always the omnipresent tolling of church bells marking the passage of more souls from this world to whatever judgment awaits them in the next. These sounds serve as a constant reminder that this family's suffering is only one small part of a larger catastrophe that has engulfed the entire city. You note the progression of the disease in your leather journal, comparing what you observe with previous cases recorded in your careful handwriting, and seeking patterns that might guide your treatment decisions and improve your understanding of how the pestilence affects different types of patients. The man's condition appears to match the most severe form of the disease, with advanced buboes and systemic corruption that suggests the pestilence has spread throughout his body's vital humors and begun the process of organ failure that precedes death. His skin has taken on a grayish pallor that indicates his natural heat is failing in its battle against the corruption that courses through his veins like liquid death, while his pulse, when you check it carefully with your rod, feels weak and irregular, suggesting that his heart struggles to maintain the circulation needed to fight off the disease. The combination of symptoms paints a grim picture of a man whose body has been overwhelmed by forces beyond his ability to resist. The treatment must begin immediately with bloodletting, the most reliable method known to medical science for removing the corrupted humors that carry disease through the body's vital systems and allow them to be expelled before they can cause further damage. This ancient technique, refined over centuries of medical practice, works by relieving the pressure created by corrupted blood and allowing the body's natural healing mechanisms to reassert themselves against the forces of disease and corruption. Using your iron rod as a pointer to maintain safe distance, you indicate to the woman where she should place a wooden chair beside her husband's makeshift bed, positioning it so that you can perform the bloodletting procedure without exposing yourself to direct contact with the infectious vapors that surround the patient. The chair must be positioned carefully to allow access to the patient's arm while maintaining the protective barrier that keeps you safe from contamination. You withdraw a sharp knife from your leather bag, its blade forged from the finest steel available, and honed to surgical sharpness by craftsmen who understand the precise requirements for medical work. The knife represents one of your most important tools, its edge maintained through careful attention and regular sharpening to ensure that cuts are clean and precise, minimizing trauma to the patient while allowing for efficient removal of corrupted blood. The blade must be purified before use according to ancient medical protocols, so you hold it carefully in the flame of a candle until the metal grows warm, the fire burning away any corruption that might cling to its surface and potentially introduce additional contamination into the patient's body. The purification process also serves to invoke divine blessing on the procedure, recognizing that successful treatment requires both earthly skill and heavenly assistance. The patient's arm extends weakly from beneath his woolen blanket, the flesh pale and clammy except where dark veins show through the skin like shadowy rivers carrying poison throughout his body. The arm trembles slightly with the effort required to maintain even this simple position, while the skin feels cold to the touch despite the fever that burns within his core, suggesting that his circulation has been compromised by the disease's effects on his cardiovascular system. You identify the proper vein for bloodletting by careful observation and gentle touch using the tip of your iron rod, tracing its path beneath the skin without making direct contact that might transfer corruption from the patient to your protected body. The vein feels swollen and hot, confirming that corrupted blood courses through it under pressure created by the body's struggle against the disease. The selection of the correct vein requires knowledge passed down through generations of physicians who have perfected these techniques through careful study and practice. A quick, precise cut opens the vein cleanly, with minimal trauma to surrounding tissues, and dark blood immediately begins to flow into the copper bowl that the woman holds with trembling hands positioned carefully to catch every drop of the precious fluid. The blood appears thick and almost black in color, clearly showing the presence of corrupted humors that must be removed to give the patient any chance of survival against the forces that threaten to destroy his body from within. The color and consistency of the blood provide important diagnostic information about the nature and extent of the corruption present in the patient's system, allowing you to adjust your treatment approach based on what the bloodletting reveals about his condition. Dark, thick blood indicates severe corruption that requires extensive removal, while changes in color during the procedure can signal improvement in the patient's condition or the need to halt the treatment before weakening him excessively. As the bloodletting proceeds at a steady pace, you begin preparing medicine from your collection of precious vials and powders, each ingredient carefully selected for its specific properties in fighting the pestilence and supporting the body's natural defenses against corruption. The preparation of medicines during bloodletting allows you to observe the patient's response to the procedure while ensuring that therapeutic substances are ready for immediate use when the blood removal is complete. Powdered unicorn horn forms the base of the mixture, its pure white color representing its legendary power to counteract all forms of poison and corruption, while its rarity and expense reflect the desperate nature of the situation that requires such valuable substances to be used in the fight against death. The unicorn horn, actually ground narwhal tusk obtained at enormous cost from northern merchants, has been blessed by priests and prepared according to ancient alchemical methods that preserve its protective properties. To this precious base, you add pulverized pearls that have been ground to the finest powder possible using techniques that preserve their oceanic essence, their origin in the pure depths of the sea, giving them special power against diseases that spread through corrupted air and contaminated environments. The pearls must be crushed in specific ways that avoid damaging their essential properties, while prayers recited during their preparation invoke divine blessing on their medicinal use. A small but precious amount of gold dust completes the mixture, its incorruptible nature lending strength to the patient's vital forces and providing a barrier against the spiritual as well as physical aspects of the disease that threatens his life. The gold has been prepared through alchemical processes that transform the pure metal into forms that can be absorbed by human bodies, allowing its essential properties to strengthen mortal flesh against the supernatural forces that many believe are responsible for the pestilence. These rare and expensive ingredients, each one representing a significant investment in the fight against death, are mixed carefully with rose water and honey according to precise formulas that have been refined over generations of medical practice. The rose water provides a pleasant taste that makes the medicine easier for weakened patients to swallow, while the honey serves as a binding agent that holds the mixture together and preserves its potency over time. The preparation requires precise measurements and careful attention to the order in which ingredients are combined, as any deviation from established procedures could reduce the medicine's effectiveness or even render it harmful to the patient. Each step is performed with prayers for divine guidance and blessing, recognizing that the success of earthly treatments depends ultimately on heavenly mercy and intervention. The bloodletting continues steadily as you monitor both the quantity and quality of blood being removed, watching carefully for changes in color or consistency that might indicate the procedure's effectiveness in removing corruption from the patient's system. You judge that approximately half a pint must be taken to relieve the pressure of corrupted humors without weakening the patient so much that his natural heat cannot continue its fight against the disease. The amount of blood removed must be calculated carefully based on the patient's size, constitution, and the severity of his condition, as too little will fail to provide relief, while too much could prove fatal to someone already weakened by disease. The decision requires experience and judgment developed through years of practice, combined with careful observation of the patient's responses during the procedure. Gradually, the blood's color begins to lighten slightly as the procedure continues, suggesting that the worst of the corruption is being drawn out, and the patient's natural healing processes may be beginning to reassert themselves against the forces of disease. This improvement in blood quality provides hope that the treatment may be successful, though the patient's overall condition remains critical and his survival far from certain. When enough blood has been collected according to your professional judgment, you clean the wound carefully with wine that has been blessed and prepared specifically for medical use, its alcohol content serving to purify the cut while it's sacred. Nature provides spiritual protection against infection. The wine stings the wound as it cleanses, but this discomfort serves to stimulate the patient's natural healing responses and helps seal the opening against further contamination. The wound is then bound with strips of clean linen cloth that have been blessed with holy water and prepared according to ancient medical protocols that ensure both physical and spiritual protection for the healing tissue. The bandages must be applied with precise tension to stop bleeding without cutting off circulation, while their blessed nature provides additional protection against the corrupted air that surrounds the patient continuously. Next, you must address the buboes directly, for these swellings contain concentrated corruption that threatens to burst and spread its poison throughout the patient's body in a final, catastrophic release that would almost certainly prove fatal. The buboes represent the disease's attempt to collect and concentrate its corrupting influence in specific locations, and they must be treated with the most powerful remedies available to draw out their poison before they can complete their deadly work. You prepare a special poultice using ground unicorn horn that has been blessed by cathedral priests and processed according to ancient alchemical methods, crushed pearls that carry the purifying essence of ocean depths, and aromatic herbs that have been gathered from sacred gardens and prepared with prayers for their healing power. This mixture represents the pinnacle of medical knowledge combined with divine blessing, creating a treatment that addresses both the physical and spiritual aspects of the disease. Using your iron rod to maintain safe distance, you direct the woman in applying this precious mixture to each of the dark swellings, taking extreme care that she does not touch the infected areas with her bare hands or allow the corrupted substances to contact her skin. The application must be thorough but gentle, covering each bubo completely while avoiding healthy tissue that might absorb the corruption and spread it to new areas of the body. The poultice must be applied in a specific pattern that follows the body's natural energy flows, with prayers recited during the process to invoke divine assistance in drawing out the corruption and healing the damaged tissue. The woman's hands shake as she follows your directions, her fear evident, but her determination to save her husband, providing the courage needed to perform this dangerous task. The room itself requires purification to prevent the spread of pestilence to other family members who may yet escape the disease and survive this terrible ordeal that has already claimed so many victims throughout the city. The air must be cleansed of corrupted vapors that have accumulated during the patient's illness, while the surfaces and objects in the room need treatment to eliminate any contamination that might serve as a source of future infection. You light a small brazier using charcoal that has been blessed in kindling that comes from trees grown in sacred ground, creating a fire that burns with both natural and supernatural purifying power. The charcoal burns with steady heat that drives moisture from the air, reducing the humidity that many physicians believe helps corrupted vapors to take hold and spread their influence throughout enclosed spaces. To the glowing coals, you add aromatic woods carefully selected for their specific properties in fighting corruption. Cedar for its cleansing power that has been recognized since ancient times. Juniper for protection against evil influences that seek to claim new victims, and rosemary for purification of the air itself and elimination of the poisonous vapors that spread disease from person to person. Each wood contributes its own essential properties to the rising smoke that will fill the room with protective influences. The sweet smoke that rises from this sacred fire should drive away the corrupted vapors that fill the room like an invisible poison, replacing them with purified air that supports healing rather than spreading disease. The smoke carries prayers upward to heaven while simultaneously cleansing the earthly atmosphere of influences that threaten the living with corruption and death. While the purifying smoke fills the air with its protective influence, you recite prayers in Latin that have been used for generations to invoke divine power in the fight against pestilence and corruption. The ancient words carry the accumulated spiritual force of countless priests and physicians who have spoken them in similar circumstances, their combined faith creating a powerful barrier against the forces of evil that seek to claim new victims. The woman listens intently as you provide detailed instructions for her husband's continued care, though you communicate primarily through gestures and simple words to minimize the time spent in this contaminated atmosphere where every breath carries the risk of infection. Your instructions must be clear and complete, as the patient's survival may depend on the precise execution of treatments in your absence. She must change the poultices twice daily, morning and evening, using fresh preparations that maintain their potency against the corruption that threatens to overwhelm her husband's weakened defenses. The timing is critical, as too frequent changes might disturb the healing process while 2 infrequent applications could allow the corruption to regain its hold on his body. The brazier must be kept burning constantly, with fresh aromatic materials added regularly to maintain the protective smoke that keeps corrupted vapors from re-establishing themselves in the room's atmosphere. The fire serves as both physical and spiritual protection, its light driving away the shadows where evil influences might hide, while its smoke purifies the very air that the family breathes. Small amounts of the prepared medicine must be given to the patient dissolved in wine, the liquid helping him swallow the precious substances while adding its own protective properties to the treatment. The doses must be measured carefully and administered at specific intervals to maintain the medicine's effectiveness without overwhelming his weakened digestive system. Most importantly, she must avoid direct contact with her husband or exposure to his breath, maintaining the protective distance that will keep her from joining him as a victim of the disease that has already claimed so many lives throughout the city. This instruction causes visible pain as she realizes that comforting touch is forbidden, but her survival depends on maintaining these precautions despite the emotional cost. You leave her with enough medicine for 3 days of treatment, along with detailed written instructions that she can follow even if she cannot read, the symbols and drawings you provide serving as a guide for proper care. The instructions include specific prayers to recite during each treatment, recognizing that spiritual protection is as important as physical medicine in the fight against forces that transcend natural understanding. Before departing from this house of sickness and sorrow, you make careful notes in your journal about the patient's condition, the treatments administered, and the family's circumstances, information that may prove valuable in understanding how the disease spreads and how it might be more effectively treated in future cases. Each case contributes to the growing body of knowledge that may eventually lead to better methods for fighting this terrible plague that threatens all of Christian civilization. The second house that requires your attention lies 3 streets away from the first, marked by an older red cross that has begun to fade from bright red to rusty brown, indicating that the plague has been present in this dwelling for some time and has likely progressed through several stages of its deadly course. The fading of the paint tells a story of suffering that has continued for days or weeks, while the family within has watched their loved ones sicken and perhaps die despite all their efforts to fight the disease. This dwelling clearly belongs to a baker, as evidenced by the large bread oven built into the ground floor and the lingering smell of yeast and flour that even the pestilence cannot completely erase from walls and timbers that have absorbed these aromas over years of bread making. The oven stands cold now, its fires extinguished by the crisis that has made normal life impossible, while the tools of the baker's trade lie abandoned and covered with dust. The baker's wife greets you at the door, her flour-dusted apron now stained with other, less pleasant substances that speak of long days and nights spent caring for the sick without regard for her own cleanliness or comfort. Her face shows the exhaustion that comes from maintaining constant vigil over loved ones while fearing for her own life with every breath she takes in the contaminated atmosphere of her home. Inside the house, the situation proves even more heartbreaking than the previous case, as 2 small children lie together on a single bed, both showing the early signs of pestilence that strike terror into every parent's heart and represent the disease's most cruel victims. The sight of young lives threatened by forces beyond their understanding or ability to fight creates a profound sense of injustice that challenges faith and tests the limits of human endurance. The boy, perhaps 8 years old, burns with fever, but remains conscious and aware of his surroundings, his young mind struggling to understand why his body has become a source of pain and weakness. His eyes follow your movements with the clarity of a child who knows that something terrible is happening, but cannot fully comprehend the magnitude of the threat that hangs over his family like a shadow of death. The girl, younger by several years, has already developed the characteristic swellings that mark the disease's progression beyond the early stages, and she slips in and out of consciousness like a small boat tossed on stormy waters. Her breathing comes in shallow gasps that speak of lungs struggling against corruption, while her small body trembles with chills despite the fever that burns within her delicate frame. Treating children requires fundamentally different approaches than those used for adult patients, as their smaller bodies cannot tolerate the same intensity of treatment that might save a grown person. Their delicate systems become unbalanced more quickly under the stress of disease, while their natural heat is insufficient to fight the corruption. Without careful support from medicines and treatments, specifically adapted to their unique needs. Their blood vessels are smaller and more fragile than those of adults, requiring extreme precision in bloodletting procedures to avoid causing additional trauma to bodies already weakened by disease. The amounts of medicine they can safely receive must be calculated based on their size and constitution, with careful attention to signs that might indicate they are being overwhelmed by treatments intended to help them. You begin with the boy, whose condition appears less advanced and therefore more likely to respond to treatment if intervention is provided quickly enough to halt the disease's progress. His fever burns high, but his consciousness remains clear, suggesting that the corruption has not yet reached the most vital organs where its presence would herald almost certain death. A small, careful cut in his thin arm releases only a few ounces of blood, but even this small amount appears dark and thick with the corruption that the disease carries through young bodies with the same deadly efficiency it shows in adults. The sight of contaminated blood flowing from such a small patient creates a profound sense of the disease's power to corrupt innocence and destroy the future represented by children. For children, you must prepare gentler medicines that their delicate constitutions can accept without being overwhelmed by substances that might help adults but prove too powerful for developing systems. The balance between effectiveness and safety becomes even more critical when treating patients whose bodies are still growing and whose organs have not yet reached full maturity. Powdered pearls mixed with honey and rosewater creates a sweet syrup that children can swallow more easily than the bitter herbs typically used for adult patients, while the pleasant taste helps overcome the natural resistance that sick children show toward taking medicine. The preparation must be exact in its proportions, as too little will prove ineffective while too much could harm rather than help these vulnerable patients. A very small amount of powdered gold adds strength to their developing vital forces without overwhelming their delicate systems with substances their bodies cannot properly process. The gold must be prepared in especially fine particles that can be absorbed safely by young digestive systems, while the amount used must be calculated with extreme precision based on the child's weight and constitution. The girl's condition concerns you more deeply, as her symptoms have progressed further than her brother's, and her young body shows signs of serious weakness that suggest the disease may have gained an irreversible hold on her system. The swellings under her arms have grown large and dark, pressing against her delicate skin and causing obvious pain with every movement she makes. Her breathing becomes increasingly difficult as the corruption spreads through her small frame with the relentless efficiency that has made this disease such an effective killer of the young and innocent. Her periods of unconsciousness grow longer and deeper, suggesting that the disease may be affecting her brain as well as her other organs, while her pulse grows weak and irregular under your careful examination. You prepare a special poultice using your most potent ingredients, ground unicorn horn that has been blessed by cathedral priests and processed according to the most sacred alchemical methods, powdered rubies that carry the life-giving power of their red color and the strength of the earth that created them, and rare herbs brought from the Holy Land by returning pilgrims who risked their lives to gather these precious substances. This mixture represents the pinnacle of medical knowledge combined with the most powerful spiritual protections available, creating a treatment that should draw out corruption if anything in this world can accomplish such a miraculous feat. The preparation of such precious medicines for children reflects both the value placed on young lives and the recognition that their salvation requires the most powerful remedies available. The mother assists in applying these treatments under your careful direction, her hands shaking with fear and exhaustion as she follows your gestured instructions with the desperate precision of someone who understands that her children's lives depend on following your guidance exactly. Her maternal instincts war with the terror of potentially causing harm through inexpert application of powerful medicines. She must wear thick leather gloves that provide protection against direct contact with the corrupted substances that emerge from her children's bodies, while keeping her face turned away from their breath to avoid breathing the poisonous vapors that they exhale with each labored breath. The protective measures create a terrible distance between mother and children at the time when they most need comfort and reassurance. The room is small and cramped, making it difficult to maintain the proper distance for safety while still providing the necessary care. But you guide her movements precisely with your iron rod to ensure that she remains as protected as possible while still being able to help her children. Every gesture must be calculated to balance effectiveness against the risk of spreading infection to the one family member who might yet survive this ordeal. Purification of this house requires special attention due to the presence of the large baking oven, which can be used to aid in driving away corrupted vapors through the creation of strong updrafts that carry contaminated air out of the living spaces and replace it with cleaner atmosphere from outside. The oven's residual heat from previous baking can be rekindled to create the thermal currents needed to purge the house of corruption. You instruct the woman to maintain a low fire in the oven constantly, feeding it with aromatic woods and herbs that will fill the entire house with purifying smoke while creating the air circulation needed to prevent stagnant pockets where corrupted vapors might accumulate and concentrate their poisonous influence. The heat from the oven also helps to dry the air, reducing the moisture that many physicians believe helps corrupted vapors to spread and take hold in human bodies. Special attention must be paid to the children's sleeping area, where their breath and bodily emanations have created a concentrated source of corruption that threatens to reinfect them even as treatments begin to show success. The bedding must be changed frequently, and the old materials burned completely to prevent any remaining contamination from undoing the progress made through medical intervention. You leave the mother with detailed instructions for caring for both children, including specific prayers to recite while applying medicines and exact timing for treatments that must be followed precisely if the children are to have any chance of survival. The care of multiple patients requires careful coordination to ensure that neither child is neglected while attention is focused on the other. Children require more frequent attention than adult patients, with smaller doses of medicine given more often throughout both day and night to maintain the treatment's effectiveness without overwhelming their developing systems. The mother must maintain this schedule despite her own exhaustion and the emotional toll of watching her children suffer. You also provide her with a supply of blessed salt that should be sprinkled around the children's bed to create a spiritual barrier against evil influences, along with special candles made from blessed wax that should be kept burning continuously to provide divine protection in addition to the medical treatments. These spiritual protections recognize that the fight against pestilence requires both earthly knowledge and heavenly assistance. The day grows warmer as the sun climbs higher and begins to burn away the morning fog that has shrouded the city in its gray embrace, and you move through the narrow streets toward your next appointment with suffering and death. The sunlight, filtering through the hazy atmosphere created by countless purification fires burning throughout the city, reveals the true extent of the ordeal that has befallen this once great center of learning and commerce. Empty market stalls stand abandoned where merchants once displayed their wares and conducted the business that kept the city's economy flowing like lifeblood through its commercial arteries. The absence of normal commercial activity creates an eerie silence that speaks of economic collapse accompanying the human devastation wrought by the pestilence. Windows remain shuttered even in the growing daylight, as people fear that opening them might allow corrupted air to enter their homes and claim new victims from families that may have so far escaped the disease's attention. The closed windows create a city of darkened buildings that resemble tombs more than homes where life and hope once flourished. The few people visible on the streets move quickly and purposefully, avoiding contact with others and covering their faces against the dangerous atmosphere that surrounds them like an invisible ocean of death. Their hurried movements and fearful glances speak of a population living in constant terror of the next outbreak or the appearance of symptoms that herald their own doom. Your third patient lives in the artisan quarter, where skilled craftsmen once created the goods that brought prosperity and reputation to Paris as a center of excellence in metalworking, textile production, and other trades that require years of training and generations of accumulated knowledge. The house bears both the Red Cross of Plague and a metal symbol indicating a metalworker's shop, its sign now serving more as a memorial than an advertisement for services that can no longer be provided. The ground floor workshop sits empty and silent, its forge cold and tools covered with a fine layer of dust that speaks of days or weeks without use, while the silence that fills the space echoes with the absence of the rhythmic hammering and crackling fires that once marked this as a place of productive activity. The craftsman who once shaped iron and brass into useful and beautiful objects now lies upstairs, his strong hands weakened by the same pestilence that shows no respect for skill, strength, or social position. The metalworker's case presents unique challenges that require adaptation of your usual treatment methods to account for the specific ways that his profession may have affected his body's response to disease. His previous work exposed him daily to the heat of forges and the fumes of various metals being heated and shaped, which may have provided some initial protection by purifying the air he breathed through the extreme temperatures that kill many forms of corruption. However, the pestilence has found him nonetheless, proving that even the most robust constitution and the most protective working conditions cannot provide complete safety against a disease that seems to strike without regard for any human. Precautions or defenses? His naturally strong constitution fights the disease differently than weaker patients might, requiring adjustments to standard treatments that take advantage of his physical strength while avoiding approaches that might prove counterproductive. His body's response to bloodletting reveals several interesting characteristics that you note carefully in your journal for future reference, as understanding how different constitutions react to treatment may help improve care for other patients with similar backgrounds. The metalworker's blood flows more freely than usual, suggesting that his natural heat, developed through years of working near fires, helps to thin the corrupted humors and allows them to be removed more easily than in patients with cooler constitutions. You allow more blood to flow than you would with a typical patient, nearly a full pint, before judging that enough corruption has been removed from his system to give his natural defenses a chance to reassert themselves against the disease. The larger amount reflects both his robust constitution and the greater volume of corrupted blood that his strong circulation system has allowed to accumulate throughout his body. The blood's color gradually lightens as the procedure continues, which you interpret as a promising sign that his body is responding well to the treatment and that his natural heat is beginning to gain ground against the corruption that has invaded his system. This improvement provides hope that his survival chances may be better than those of weaker patients, though his ultimate fate remains uncertain. For a patient of his robust constitution, stronger medicines are not only appropriate but necessary to match his natural strength and provide adequate support for his body's fight against the forces of disease and corruption. Standard dosages that might help weaker patients could prove insufficient for someone whose system has been strengthened by years of physical labor and exposure to the purifying effects of intense heat. Your most potent theriac, made with viper's flesh and 63 other carefully chosen ingredients according to ancient recipes preserved in monastery libraries, should provide him with the power needed to overcome the corruption that has invaded his system despite his natural defenses. You dissolve a generous amount of this precious medicine in strong wine, creating a mixture that would overwhelm a weaker patient but should give this man the strength he needs to survive this ordeal. The workshop on the ground floor provides access to materials that can be useful for his treatment in ways that would not apply to other patients. Taking advantage of his professional knowledge and the specialized equipment available in his workplace, iron filings, when properly heated in the forge and prepared according to ancient alchemical techniques, can be added to poultices to provide additional strength and resistance to corruption. The iron's natural properties of resisting corruption can be transferred to human flesh through proper preparation and application, while the patient's familiarity with working with heated metals makes him more likely to tolerate treatments that involve these substances. Copper dust, when prepared through specific processes that unlock its medicinal properties, helps to balance the humors and fight the fever that threatens to consume his vital forces. You direct his wife in preparing these unusual materials while maintaining the safe distances that protect both of you from the corruption that surrounds her husband's weakened form. The preparation requires lighting the forge and heating the metals to specific temperatures while adding blessed substances that enhance their medicinal properties and invoke divine protection on their use. The forge itself can be used to create especially potent purifying fires that burn aromatic woods and herbs at temperatures that drive away even the most stubborn corrupted vapors that might resist normal purification methods. The intense heat creates updrafts that pull contaminated air out of the house while drawing in cleaner atmosphere from outside, creating a circulation system that helps prevent the accumulation of corruption in enclosed spaces. You instruct the woman to maintain a fire in the forge constantly, adding a special mixture of aromatic herbs and metals that will create smoke particularly effective against pestilence while providing the heat needed to maintain air circulation throughout the house. The combination of natural and artificial purification methods represents the most advanced techniques available for fighting corruption in all its forms. The heat from the forge also helps to dry the air throughout the house, reducing the moisture that many physicians believe helps corrupted vapors to spread and take hold in human bodies, while the light from the flames drives away the shadows where evil influences might hide and concentrate their power. The workshop becomes a fortress of light and heat against the forces of darkness and corruption that threaten all who dwell within the city's walls. Midday brings you to the monastery hospital of Saint Benedict, where the brothers of that ancient order tend to the sick in a large stone hall lined with rows of straw mattresses that stretch from one massive wall to the other like soldiers arrayed for battle against the forces of death and despair. The monastery's substantial resources, accumulated over centuries of charitable work and careful stewardship, allow for better treatment than most private homes can provide during this time of crisis. Clean straw is changed regularly to prevent the accumulation of corruption in bedding materials, while wine flows freely for medicinal purposes without regard for the enormous expense that such generosity represents in these difficult times. The constant prayers of the brothers provide spiritual protection against the forces of evil that many believe are responsible for the pestilence, while their disciplined community life creates an environment where medical care can be provided with maximum efficiency and effectiveness. Brother Thomas, the infirmarian who oversees the hospital according to the traditions of monastic medicine that date back centuries, greets you respectfully at the heavy wooden gate that protects the monastery complex from the corrupted air and dangerous influences that fill the streets outside. He wears a simple cloth mask soaked in vinegar and maintains respectful distance while reporting on the conditions of the patients currently under his care, his voice muffled but still conveying the gravity of the situation within the hospital walls. 12 men currently occupy the hospital beds, representing various stages of the pestilence from early fever through the final stages that precede death, their conditions creating a living laboratory where the disease's progression can be observed and studied under controlled conditions. The monastery's stone construction provides better protection against corrupted air than the wooden houses where most people live, while the thick walls and high ceilings create an environment where purifying incense can circulate effectively throughout the treatment areas. The constant burning of incense in the chapel helps to purify the atmosphere throughout the entire complex, creating a barrier of blessed smoke that protects both patients and caregivers from the worst effects of the corrupted air that surrounds them. The prayers that accompany this incense create spiritual protection that complements the physical barriers, recognizing that the fight against pestilence requires both earthly medicine and heavenly intervention. Your first examination focuses on a merchant who arrived only yesterday evening, already showing the characteristic swellings that mark the plague's presence in his body, despite having traveled from distant regions where the disease was reportedly less severe. His expensive traveling clothes, made from fine wool and decorated with silver buttons, and the dust that still clings to his leather boots, suggest recent arrival from somewhere in southern France, where reports indicate that the pestilence takes a somewhat different form than what has been observed in the northern regions around Paris. This variation in the disease's manifestation requires careful study to understand how treatment methods might need to be adjusted for maximum effectiveness when dealing with patients who have been exposed to different strains or regional variants of the same underlying corruption. The differences could provide valuable clues about the nature of the pestilence and how it adapts to different climates, populations, and local conditions as it spreads across the continent. The merchant's buboes appear larger than those typically seen in local cases, swelling to the size of small apples, and creating obvious discomfort as they press against his clothing and restrict his movement. However, they are less dark in color than usual, showing a purplish-red hue rather than the deep black that usually indicates advanced corruption, suggesting that this southern form of the disease may affect the body's humors in a different manner than the variant that has devastated Paris. His fever burns high and constant, creating waves of heat that can be felt even from a safe distance, but his breathing remains relatively clear compared to other patients in similar stages of the disease, indicating that this form of pestilence may attack different organ systems or follow a different progression through the body. These differences suggest that regional variations in climate, diet, and living conditions may influence how the disease manifests itself in different populations. The regional variations in the disease present fascinating opportunities for advancing medical knowledge. If only there were time and safety to conduct proper studies that could reveal the underlying principles governing how the pestilence adapts to different environments. Such knowledge might eventually lead to more effective treatments tailored to specific forms of the disease, though the immediate priority remains providing care to those who suffer, regardless of which variant has claimed them. Bloodletting proceeds according to normal procedures, but the blood that flows from his opened vein appears less thick and dark than expected based on his other symptoms, suggesting that the corruption in his case affects his vital fluids differently than in typical northern cases. The blood flows more freely and shows a brighter red color that gradually darkens as the procedure continues, indicating that the southern form may concentrate its effects differently throughout the body's systems. This difference in blood characteristics suggests that the corruption affects his humoral balance in ways that require adjustments to standard treatment protocols, possibly due to the different foods and wines he consumed during his travels through other regions where different medical traditions and dietary customs prevail. You adjust the treatment accordingly, using local herbs that should help his body adapt to the Parisian form of the disease while addressing the specific characteristics of his condition. Brother Thomas proves invaluable in preparing medicines, as his monastery training has provided him with knowledge and skills that far exceed those of most laypeople who attempt to care for plague victims. His education in the medical traditions preserved in monastic libraries, combined with years of practical experience caring for the sick, makes him an ideal partner in creating the complex treatments required for unusual cases like this traveling merchant. Together, you create a complex mixture designed to address both the merchant's original condition as acquired in southern France and help his body adjust to the local form of pestilence that dominates in the Paris region. Herbs from the monastery's extensive gardens, cultivated by brothers who have studied the medicinal properties of plants for generations, are combined with your imported medicines to create a treatment that is specifically tailored to his unique circumstances. The monastery's well-stocked pharmacy contains herbs and compounds that would be impossible to obtain elsewhere in the city, as the brothers maintain extensive trade relationships with other religious communities throughout Europe and beyond. These connections allow access to rare substances from distant lands, including herbs from the mountains of Spain, roots from the forests of Germany, and spices from the markets of Constantinople. The monastery's chapel provides an ideal location for conducting the purification rituals that should enhance the effectiveness of your medical treatments by invoking divine assistance in the healing process. Incense burns constantly before the altar, creating an atmosphere that helps drive away corrupted vapors while providing spiritual protection for both healers and patients. The accumulated prayers of generations of monks have sanctified this space, making it particularly powerful for conducting healing rituals. You conduct special prayers over your medicines, blessing them with the additional spiritual power that is available in this sacred space where the boundary between heaven and earth seems thinner than in the outside world. The prayers invoke not only general divine protection, but also specific saints known for their healing powers and their intercession on behalf of those who suffer from pestilence and corruption. Brother Thomas assists you in examining other patients in the monastery hospital, each case providing opportunities to observe how the disease affects different types of people and how various treatments influence its progression. An elderly monk shows advanced symptoms but maintains remarkable mental clarity, suggesting that spiritual strength may help resist some effects of corruption. His decades of prayer and ascetic living seem to have prepared his soul, if not his body, for this final test. A young novice displays an unusual pattern of symptoms that suggests he may have been exposed to a different strain of the disease, possibly brought by pilgrims or merchants from distant lands. His fever follows an irregular pattern that rises and falls in cycles, while his buboes appear in unusual locations that don't match the typical presentation seen in most cases. These variations provide valuable information about the disease's adaptability and the range of forms it can take. A traveling scholar from a distant university presents a case that combines elements of both northern and southern forms of the pestilence, suggesting that prolonged travel through multiple regions may expose individuals to several variants of the disease simultaneously. His symptoms include features from both forms, creating a complex case that requires careful observation and innovative treatment approaches. Each patient receives individualized treatment based on their specific symptoms and constitution, with careful attention to their spiritual as well as physical needs. The monastery setting allows for more comprehensive care than is possible in private homes, where families often lack the resources and knowledge needed to provide optimal treatment. The brothers' experience in caring for the sick provides a level of expertise that supplements your medical knowledge. You spend considerable time training brothers in proper techniques for bloodletting and application of medicines, knowing that your instructions must be followed exactly if patients are to have the best chance of survival. The brothers' ability to read and write makes them ideal students for learning complex procedures, while their religious discipline ensures that they will follow instructions precisely even in your absence. The monastery's library contains medical texts that provide guidance for unusual cases and rare forms of disease, ancient manuscripts preserved from the classical world and updated with observations from generations of monk physicians. You consult these sources when conventional treatments prove insufficient, seeking wisdom from masters who faced similar challenges in earlier times when pestilence ravaged other regions. Some patients require spiritual as well as medical attention, and the monastery setting allows for the provision of both types of care in an integrated manner that recognizes the connection between bodily and spiritual health. You find yourself working alongside the brothers to provide comfort to those who face their final hours with fear and uncertainty, offering what reassurance you can about the afterlife that awaits those who die properly prepared. The plague doctor's role often extends beyond medicine to include the spiritual guidance that desperate people seek when regular priests are unavailable or too frightened to approach the sick. In the monastery, this spiritual dimension of healing can be provided by the brothers themselves, freeing you to focus on medical treatments while ensuring that patients receive the comprehensive care they need. Evening's work in the monastery provides opportunities to observe how different treatments affect various types of patients under controlled conditions, and you make careful notes about which approaches seem most promising for future use. The brothers' detailed records of each patient's daily condition help you track the progress of the disease and the effectiveness of different interventions over time. This systematic approach to gathering knowledge may eventually lead to better understanding of how the pestilence spreads and how it might be more effectively combated, though such long-term research goals must be balanced against the immediate need to provide care to those who suffer. The monastery's resources and organized approach make it an ideal setting for advancing medical knowledge even in the midst of crisis. After completing your rounds at the monastery and ensuring that the brothers understand the care required for each patient, the afternoon takes you to the grand house of a nobleman who lives near the royal palace in one of the city's most prestigious districts. Even great wealth and elevated social position provide little protection against the great mortality, though they do allow for more comfortable conditions during the suffering that the disease brings to all who fall victim to its corruption. The nobleman's house represents the pinnacle of medieval domestic architecture, boasting luxuries that are unknown to common citizens and available only to those who have inherited or acquired enormous wealth. Windows made of actual glass rather than oiled parchment allow natural light to enter while protecting against corrupted air, while multiple fireplaces with elaborate carved mantels provide warmth throughout the building during the cold that seems to accompany the pestilence wherever it spreads. Servants trained in the most refined domestic arts attend to the nobleman's every need even during these dangerous times, their loyalty and professionalism maintained despite the risk of infection that comes with caring for a plague victim. These servants represent a level of household organization and expertise that allows for the provision of care that approaches the quality available in monastery hospitals, though applied to a single individual rather than multiple patients. The patient lies in an elaborate bed with carved wooden posts that rise toward a canopy decorated with family heraldry and curtains made of fine silk that would cost more than most people earn in several years of labor. Despite his elevated station in society and all the privileges that accompany noble birth, the pestilence affects his body much like that of any common citizen, proving that the disease recognizes no social distinctions in its choice of victims. Dark swellings appear under his arms and on his neck, with the same inexorable progression seen in peasants and craftsmen, while fever burns through his pampered flesh with the same intensity that it shows in those accustomed to physical hardship. The corruption spreads through his noble blood with the same relentless efficiency that characterizes the disease, regardless of the social status or material circumstances of its victims. However, His great wealth does allow for access to treatments and medicines that are completely unavailable to common people, creating opportunities to test the most advanced and expensive therapeutic approaches against the disease. Rare spices brought from distant lands at enormous expense, wines that have been aged for decades in monastery cellars under optimal conditions, and medicines prepared by the most skilled physicians in the kingdom fill his chambers with an abundance of therapeutic options. You examine his impressive collection of remedies, finding several that will complement your own treatments and may provide additional benefits that simpler medicines cannot offer. Some of these substances are so rare and expensive that they are normally reserved for royalty or the highest church officials, but the nobleman's desperate situation justifies their use in an attempt to save his life through the application of the most powerful medicines available. His personal physician, a learned man who received his training at the prestigious University of Paris, under masters who studied the classical texts and contemporary developments in medical science, discusses the case with you while maintaining the proper distance that safety requires. This consultation between medical professionals allows for the sharing of knowledge and expertise that can benefit the patient while advancing understanding of the disease and its treatment. The nobleman has already received bloodletting 3 times in the past week, performed by skilled physicians using the finest instruments available, along with medicines containing gold, pearls, and rare herbs imported at great expense from the eastern lands where such substances are more readily available. Despite these expensive and sophisticated treatments, administered with the greatest skill and care, his condition continues to worsen, suggesting that wealth alone cannot purchase salvation from this terrible disease. The failure of conventional treatments, despite optimal conditions and unlimited resources, provides important information about the disease's resistance to standard therapeutic approaches, while also highlighting the need for innovative methods that go beyond simply applying existing knowledge with greater resources. The case demonstrates that the pestilence represents a challenge that transcends social and economic barriers. You recommend a different approach based on your observations of successful treatments in other cases with similar characteristics, drawing on patterns you have observed across different social classes and constitutional types. Rather than the frequent bloodletting that may be weakening him excessively by depleting his vital forces faster than they can be restored, you suggest that larger amounts should be removed less frequently to avoid creating additional stress on his already compromised system. The medicines should focus on strengthening his natural heat rather than cooling his fever, as his constitution appears to be naturally cold and may benefit from warming treatments that support his body's fight against corruption rather than suppressing the fever that represents his natural defense mechanisms. This approach requires careful observation to ensure that the warming treatments don't exacerbate his condition, but it offers hope where conventional cooling methods have failed. The nobleman's well-trained servants assist in preparing new treatments under your careful supervision. Their education in household management and familiarity with complex procedures, making them far more capable than most families in following detailed instructions with precision. They understand the critical importance of exact measurements and precise timing in administering medicines, while their literacy allows them to maintain written records that will be valuable for future reference. You provide them with a detailed schedule for administering medicines and specific prayers to recite during each treatment. Recognizing that spiritual protection is as important as physical medicine in fighting forces that transcend natural understanding. The servant's training in protocol and attention to detail ensures that these instructions will be followed exactly as prescribed, maximizing the chances for successful treatment. The nobleman's case also provides an opportunity to test some of your most advanced theories about treating pestilence in patients with different constitutional types, using his resources to obtain rare substances that might not be available for testing under normal circumstances. His naturally cold and moist temperament requires warming medicines and treatments that would be inappropriate for patients with hot, dry constitutions, allowing you to explore therapeutic approaches that might benefit similar patients of lower social status. You prepare a special mixture of heating spices and herbs that should help restore balance to his humors while strengthening his body's natural defenses against the corruption that threatens his life. The preparation includes substances like cinnamon from Ceylon, ginger from the Indies, and pepper from the eastern spice markets, all obtained at enormous expense but justified by the potential to save a life and advance medical knowledge. Evening approaches as you complete your final rounds and begin the journey back to your workshop, the streets growing darker earlier than usual as people throughout the city close their shutters against the night air that is believed to carry even more corruption than the daylight hours. The transition from day to night marks a time when the forces of evil are thought to grow stronger, making protection even more critical for those who must venture outside during the dangerous hours of darkness. Braziers burn brighter now as the light fades, their flames creating pools of flickering illumination in the gathering darkness, while their aromatic smoke mingles with the evening mist to create an atmosphere that is both beautiful and ominous. The interplay of light and shadow, smoke and fog, creates a dreamlike quality that transforms familiar streets into something strange and potentially threatening. Your workshop welcomes you back with the familiar smells of herbs and medicines, and the comforting sense of controlled space where you can safely process the day's observations and prepare for tomorrow's battles against death and corruption. Here, surrounded by the tools and knowledge that represent humanity's best efforts against the pestilence, you can review each patient's condition, evaluate the effectiveness of treatments, and consider new approaches that might prove more successful in future cases. Each case must be carefully recorded in your journal with detailed notes about symptoms observed, treatments administered, and the patient's response to those interventions, creating a permanent record that may someday help other physicians understand how to combat this terrible disease more effectively. The accumulation of such knowledge represents hope that future outbreaks might be met with better understanding and more effective treatments. The day's collection of bloodletting bowls requires extremely careful disposal, as the corrupted blood they contain cannot simply be thrown away where it might spread the pestilence to others who come into contact with contaminated materials. Instead, you pour the dark fluid into a special iron container that will be heated over your fire until the blood burns away completely, destroying any corruption it contains and preventing it from causing further harm to the living. This process of destruction must be conducted with prayers and purification rituals to ensure that no trace of evil influence remains to contaminate your workshop or threaten your own health, while the iron container itself must be purified through fire and blessing before it can be used again. The careful handling of contaminated materials represents one of the most important aspects of preventing the spread of disease from your medical practice to the broader community. Each instrument used during the day needs thorough cleansing to remove any corruption that might have attached itself to metal surfaces during contact with infected patients or contaminated environments. Every blade is heated in your fire until it glows red hot, the intense heat burning away any disease-bearing substances that might cling to the steel, while also invoking divine purification through the sacred element of fire. Your iron rod receives similar treatment, its surface carefully polished until it shines like silver and reflects the firelight with a brilliance that speaks of purity restored through proper cleansing procedures. Glass vials are rinsed multiple times with wine and vinegar, then dried over the fire to ensure complete purification of both interior and exterior surfaces that might have been exposed to corruption during the day's work. Even the smallest traces of contamination must be eliminated to prevent the gradual accumulation of corruption in your workshop, where such influences could eventually overwhelm your defenses and claim you as another victim of the disease you fight. The thorough cleansing of instruments represents both practical medicine and spiritual discipline, recognizing that the fight against pestilence requires attention to both physical and supernatural aspects of the threat. Your protective clothing requires special attention before it can be safely removed, as it has served as the primary barrier between your body and the corrupted atmosphere that surrounds the sick throughout your daily rounds. The leather mask comes off first, its interior carefully wiped clean with cloth soaked in strong vinegar that burns away any corrupted vapors that might have penetrated the protective herbs during the day's exposure. The aromatic herbs that filled the beak throughout the day are disposed of with great care, as they have absorbed corrupted vapors and could spread contamination if handled carelessly, or allowed to remain in the workshop where they might release their accumulated poison into the air you breathe. Fresh herbs must be prepared and blessed for tomorrow's work, ensuring that your protection remains strong and effective against whatever challenges the next day may bring. The leather gloves receive special attention, as they have touched contaminated surfaces throughout the day and represent the greatest risk for transferring corruption from patients to your own body. Each finger is wiped carefully with vinegar, then heated near the fire to drive away any lingering corruption that might have penetrated the protective treatment of the leather through prolonged exposure to infected materials. Small tears or weak spots in the gloves are noted and marked for repair before tomorrow's use, as even the smallest hole could allow corruption to enter and begin its deadly work within your body. The long black cloak is brushed thoroughly and hung before the fire to drive away any evil influences that may have attached themselves to the fabric during your visits to infected houses throughout the city. Its waxed surface has protected you from corrupted vapors throughout the day, but the accumulation of exposure over time requires regular purification to maintain its effectiveness as a barrier against the forces that seek to claim new victims. The systematic care of protective equipment represents a crucial aspect of surviving in an environment where death stalks every street and lurks behind every door. Your evening meal consists of foods that have been specifically chosen for their protective properties against the pestilence that surrounds you on all sides. Each item selected based on centuries of accumulated knowledge about how different substances affect the body's ability to resist corruption and maintain health in the face of supernatural threats. Bread that has aged for several days reduces the risk of contamination, as evil influences cannot take hold in properly prepared grain that has been blessed and stored according to ancient methods. Wine mixed with protective herbs strengthens your blood and helps your body resist the disease that threatens everyone in the city with its invisible presence, while the alcohol content serves to purify your internal systems and prevent corruption from taking hold in your vital organs. A small portion of preserved meat provides the strength needed to continue your difficult work, while you carefully avoid fresh foods that might harbor corruption despite their apparent wholesomeness. The simple meal provides time for quiet reflection on the day's work and the patients you have tried to help, each case representing both a challenge overcome and a reminder of the limitations that constrain human efforts against forces that transcend natural understanding. Some patients have shown encouraging signs of improvement that offer hope for recovery, while others continue to decline despite your best efforts, serving as sobering reminders of mortality's power. Your medical journal receives today's entries by the flickering light of candles made from blessed wax, each flame serving as a small beacon of light against the darkness that has fallen over the city like a shroud of despair. Each patient is described in careful detail, their symptoms when you first examined them, the treatments you administered, and their responses to those interventions, creating a permanent record that preserves valuable knowledge for future use. Over the months since the pestilence arrived in Paris like an unwelcome visitor that refuses to depart, these records have begun to reveal patterns that guide your decisions about which treatments work best for different types of cases and which approaches prove most effective under various circumstances. Certain combinations of medicines prove more successful than others, while the timing and sequence of treatments appear to influence their ultimate effectiveness. Preparation for tomorrow's work begins with a careful inventory of your medical supplies, checking each vial and container to ensure that adequate quantities remain for the cases you expect to encounter based on the progression of disease throughout the city. Some ingredients require daily preparation to maintain their potency and effectiveness, while others actually improve with age and careful storage under proper conditions. The delicate balance of your pharmacy must be maintained constantly to serve whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, from simple fever cases that can be treated with basic remedies to the most advanced stages of pestilence that require your most powerful and expensive medicines. The preparation of fresh supplies represents both practical necessity and spiritual discipline, as the creation of healing substances requires prayers and blessings that invoke divine assistance. New medicines must be prepared according to ancient recipes that have been passed down through generations of physicians, each formula refined over centuries of practice and proven effective against the forces of corruption and death. Unicorn horn must be ground to the finest possible powder, using techniques that preserve its miraculous potency against all forms of poison, while the grinding process itself requires specific prayers and timing to maintain the substance's essential properties. Pearls require crushing in very specific ways that release their protective powers without destroying the essential qualities that make them effective against corruption, while the preparation must be conducted with reverence for the ocean depths that created these precious substances over long years of natural processes. Gold must be prepared through alchemical processes that allow its incorruptible nature to strengthen human bodies against the disease that threatens to destroy them. The evening prayers provide essential spiritual preparation for tomorrow's continuation of your battle against the forces of death and corruption that have claimed so many victims throughout the city. Kneeling before your small altar in the candlelit workshop, you seek divine guidance and protection for the work that lies ahead, recognizing that human knowledge alone cannot prevail against supernatural enemies. This calling requires far more than medical knowledge and earthly skill. It demands constant assistance from the Almighty to succeed against a disease that many learned theologians believe represents God's righteous wrath against the accumulated sins of humanity. The prayers seek not only protection for yourself but also guidance in your treatments and compassion for those who suffer, while asking for mercy on behalf of a city that has endured such terrible punishment. The prayers also include specific requests for protection for each of the patients you have treated during the day, asking that divine mercy might work through your earthly treatments to provide healing where recovery remains possible and peaceful. Death where the corruption has progressed beyond hope of cure. The weight of responsibility for so many lives rests heavily on your shoulders, and you seek divine strength to continue this work despite the constant presence of suffering and loss. Incense burns throughout your evening prayers, creating an atmosphere of purification that prepares both your workshop and your spirit for the next day's challenges against the forces that threaten all of human civilization. The sweet smoke drives away any corrupted vapors that might have followed you home from your rounds among the infected, while the act of prayer aligns your purpose with divine will and renews your commitment to this sacred calling. As the night deepens and the city settles into the uneasy quiet that has replaced the normal sounds of commerce and celebration, you complete your preparations and approach the rest that will restore your strength for tomorrow's battles. The straw mattress that serves as your bed feels soft and welcoming after the long day of walking through corrupted streets and tending to the sick in their dark chambers, while the familiar walls of your workshop provide security against the dangers that stalk the streets outside. Through the window of your sanctuary, you can see the glow of fires burning throughout the city as people continue their desperate attempts to purify the air and drive away the invisible forces that carry death from house to house like a plague wind that recognizes no barriers. The night sounds of the plague-stricken city create a melancholy symphony that speaks of a civilization under siege by forces beyond human comprehension or control. Sleep comes slowly, filled with images of the day's patients and considerations of their treatments, while your mind continues to process observations and seek new understanding of this terrible disease that has brought such suffering to the world. In your dreams, you see the faces of those you have tried to help, wondering which ones will survive the night and which will join the growing number of souls that the pestilence has claimed from among the living. Tomorrow will bring new cases, new challenges, and new opportunities to apply your knowledge against the forces of corruption and death that threaten all of humanity, while each patient saved represents a small victory in the larger battle for the survival of Christian civilization itself. Sleep finally claims you, bringing temporary peace before another day of warfare against the great mortality that tests the very foundations of human knowledge and divine mercy.